standing right in front of the gate. And this is basically a detail view and an elevation view. See, it called it a detail view on the previous page, but when we look here, they call it an elevation view. Okay. And so what do we see here? We can see that this is the footing for this gate. Okay, very specific, right? We can take these measurements, or because it's to scale, we can measure it ourselves. Okay, it's like the post. Okay, in this video, we are going to do a deep dive into the architectural set, into the A plans. And what are the A plans? How do they differ from the others? And what does everything in it mean? You have to make sure, first of all, that you know how to navigate through the set. If you are an estimator, for sure, but I know a lot of contractors that really aren't comfortable.
At first, none of us moved or stood up. But then he said, y'all make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats.
One of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger.
She was very well aware that it could mean imprisonment, beating, ostracizing, even death.
Well, it's not that I was just fed up then. I had been fed up all my life, as far back as I could remember, with being treated as less than a free person.
It was just this humble, single individual, and she started a bonfire.
The sense that history is changing on that first morning when literally nobody rode the buses was a truly awe-inspiring sight.
All of us who are here think that we are seated, but we're really standing on someone's shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Rosa Parks.
Thank you very much.
Rosa Parks was 82 when she spoke to the huge rally in Washington, D.C. on October 16, 1995.
To help them if they're
Louis Farrakhan, the controversial black nationalist, had drawn the crowd. The times and the tactics had changed since the dawn of the civil rights movement. But Rosa Parks, who started it all, remained a symbol of courage and conscience.
I am proud of all groups of people who feel connected with me in any way, and I will always work for human rights for all people.
Many, perhaps most of those listening, had not been born on the December day nearly 40 years earlier, when Rosa Parks had changed the course of history with a spontaneous act of courage and defiance.
For a number of years, the Negro passengers on the city bus lines of Montgomery have been humiliated, intimidated, and faced threats.
And to get up, and not only just tell you to get up, nigger get up, nigger get up.
Rosa Parks put an end to that on December 1st, 1955, when she refused to give up her seat to a white man on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Overnight, the city's black community united behind her and behind a young black minister named Martin Luther King Jr. For more than a year, blacks refused to ride the segregated buses, even if it meant walking to work.
I tell you, I was talking to a black man who's trudging along, and I said, how you doing? How things going? He said, well, my feet are tired, but my soul is rested.
Parks sparked a boycott that ended segregation on Montgomery's buses and inspired a movement that changed the nation.
She was the heroine, she was the leader, she was the symbol, and therefore she's regarded as the mother of the civil rights movement.
But Parks' struggle for civil rights began long before she became a symbol. She started down that path at a time when slavery was a living memory, and in a place where equality was only a dream. Alabama in 1913 was, like much of the American South, two parallel societies. One was white and took pride in the traditional Southern values: hospitality, gentility, and self-reliance. Some of its white citizens could still remember the Civil War, a war they felt had been fought to defend those values. The other society in Alabama was black. These citizens remembered the Civil War for bringing slavery to an end and saw the South as upholding a system of subjugation, intimidation, and exploitation that had replaced slavery.
It's a carryover from the antebellum period, from the period before the Civil War, where, so far as slaves were concerned, their places were clearly, unequivocally, sharply defined in the law and in practice.
Rosa Parks was born into this split society on February 4th, 1913, in Tuskegee, Alabama. Her mother, Leona Edwards Macaulay, was a teacher. Her father, James Macaulay, was a carpenter. By 1915, he had abandoned the family. Leona, Rosa, and her brother Sylvester moved in with Leona's parents in tiny Pine Level, Alabama. Rosa's grandparents were different from most rural blacks. Most were sharecroppers, farming a white man's land for a small share of the crops. Rosa's grandparents owned their own farm and were proud of it. But pride was a dangerous thing for blacks. It was safer to show a different face to whites.
There was always a life that a black man or a black woman lived that was different from the life that they lived at one part of the day or night. They never let white people think that they knew anything else, or that they felt anything else, or that they believed anything else. They had their own private way of thinking and doing.
Segregation meant that blacks were second-class citizens in every area from housing to health care. When Rosa needed medical treatment for her childhood tonsillitis, her grandfather took her to a country store, where the black doctor saw patients when he wasn't waiting on customers. He could offer no treatment to Rosa and could only compliment her for being well-behaved. When she was 5, Rosa started school in Pine Level and promptly learned some painful lessons about the differences between blacks and whites. The white school had central heating and glass windows. The black school was a one-room building heated by a wood-burning stove and sheltered from the weather by drafty wooden shutters. There were no desks. But the poverty of the rural South meant black students spent little time in the classroom.
They would maybe go for a few weeks or a few months, but they would have to come out of school to go to the field to work and that type of thing.
After World War I, black soldiers who returned to the South were no longer willing to accept segregation. They began, slowly but openly, to challenge a system that had been a way of life.
Black only, white only. You couldn't drink at the same fountain. You couldn't use the same bathroom, not even in the bus station.
Many whites responded to the threat to the status quo by joining the Ku Klux Klan. White-sheeted night riders terrorized blacks with cross burnings, beatings, and worse. Lynchings began to increase in the 1920s, sending fear throughout black neighborhoods. In Pine Level, young Rosa stayed up late as her grandfather sat with a shotgun in his lap, vowing to kill the first Klansman who came through his door. Rosa's mother, Leona, felt education was her daughter's best hope. In 1924, she sent her 11-year-old daughter to Montgomery to the Industrial School for Girls. Everyone called it Miss White's School, and it specialized in teaching black girls skills tailored to the realities of life.
We were taught everything from the basic education to occupational therapy. We were taught basket weaving, sewing, cooking, you name it, and we were taught those type things because a lot of jobs are not available for blacks.
Miss White's school had been founded after the Civil War by Quakers from the North. Its white teachers continued the school's anti-slavery traditions, instilling in their students a sense of pride and self-respect. But these were lessons some in the surrounding community could not accept.
The school was burned twice, was vandalized and burned because of the fact that there were white teachers in the community teaching black students. But each time it was burned, they were able to rebuild.
In 1931, a friend introduced 18-year-old Rosa to Raymond Parks, who worked in a barber shop in downtown Montgomery. But Parks was more than a barber. He also was active in the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, then a relatively new organization dedicated to equal rights for blacks. Rosa quickly discovered that Raymond Parks' membership in the NAACP made him a target for white hostility. Rosa knew he carried a gun to protect himself, particularly when he was raising money for the black defendants in one of the nation's most racially charged cases. The case involved 9 young black men who were arrested while riding a freight train in Scottsboro, Alabama. They were accused of raping 2 white women who had been on the same train. The trial of the Scottsboro boys lasted 3 days. 8 were convicted, entirely on circumstantial evidence. They were sentenced to death. The case got national press coverage and was followed closely by the blacks of Montgomery.
The Scottsboro boys case was a very hot issue, and we worked very diligently helping to raise money to try to save those boys from the electric chair because they were going to be electrocuted for the crime that they were supposed to have committed.
Raymond Parks worked hard to raise money for the Scottsboro boys' appeal, and the case opened Rosa's eyes to the injustice beyond the confines of Montgomery and Alabama. The quiet graduate of Miss White's School for Girls had become personally involved in the struggle for equality, but she could not have known what history had in store for her. In 1932, when she was just 19, Rosa McCauley married Raymond Parks. Although he was self-educated, Raymond supported his wife's desire for formal education, and she earned a diploma in 1934. But the best Montgomery could offer one of its few educated black women was work as a clerk or a seamstress.
There was not anything much that was really offered to blacks in the way of employment other than domestic work and that type of work.
It was the height of the Great Depression, and the lack of jobs aggravated an already hostile climate towards blacks. That hostility extended to the voting booth. In Montgomery, only 31 blacks out of 50,000 had been allowed to register. Parks joined the NAACP's campaign to increase the number of black voters, but they often faced heavy white resistance from hostile voter registrars.
Every afternoon when I got off work, I would go down to the clinic and get registered, try to fill out the paper. I went down to the board several times and was turned down.
In order to vote, blacks had to pass a literacy test, but the test schedule was not made public. So NAACP organizers found out when the test would be given and made sure blacks were lined up when the doors opened. Parks took the test herself in 1943 and passed, But she never got the certificate in the mail, and she had to take the test again. This time, she was told she had failed.
Well, just something to make it humiliating, make it inconvenient, and just something to keep your mind focused on an inferior position in life.
That inferior position into which segregation put blacks was very much a part of daily life in Montgomery. Most people, blacks and whites, didn't even think twice about it.
It was a relatively quiet community. One did not see much in the way of resentment. Everyone seemed to know his place or her place.
The place for blacks on Montgomery's public buses was in the back. Even though 2/3 of the riders were black, the buses were more strictly segregated than in most other southern cities. Only in Montgomery did bus drivers carry guns. Only in Montgomery did they have police powers to remove a black rider who didn't obey the rules. The first rule was simple. Blacks paid their fare at the front of the bus. Then they had to leave the bus and walk to the back door to re-enter.
I have seen people come to the front of the bus and hand the driver their money at the front and then have to go to the back of the bus to board it to keep them from having to come down the aisle of where the white people were standing.
Inside the bus, there were more rules. Whites in front, blacks in back, and in between, a section where blacks could sit until whites wanted their seats.
And to get up. And not only just tell you to get up, nigger get up. Nigger get up. And that's the way it was.
On a cold winter's day in 1943, Rosa Parks challenged those rules. She paid her fare in front, but noticed a crowd of blacks packing the steps at the back door. So, she began walking through the empty white section of the bus. The driver stared at her.
He wanted me to leave the bus, get out, and go around to the back door to enter, instead of passing through the white section of the bus. And when I refused to get out, he didn't call the policeman. He just took care of it himself.
He took care of it by throwing Parks off the bus. Parks made a mental note never to ride on that driver's bus again. But she took out her frustrations by working harder at the NAACP, helping E.D. Nixon, the head of the Montgomery chapter.
E.D. Nixon was Mr. Civil Rights. Whether you were interested in voter registration or if somebody is alleged to have raped a white woman, or if it was a police brutality case, you would think about E.D. Nixon.
Nixon would send blacks with legal problems to his friends Clifford and Virginia Dorr, a white couple who had been ostracized for their support of the city's black community. Clifford was a lawyer who had worked for Franklin Roosevelt. Virginia was shunned by her own family for questioning segregation.
Oh, yes, my father was a racist, and he was a Presbyterian minister, but he was Daddy thought all black people existed to wait on him.
In 1954, Virginia Dorr's daughter was engaged to be married, and she needed clothes for the wedding. Dorr asked Nixon if he could recommend a seamstress to do the work.
And he said, yes, Miss Parks would sew. So I went over to Miss Parks, and she and I became great friends. I'd go over at night and take some clothes to her, and sometimes I'd sit there and sew with her, and I got to be devoted to it.
As they talked, Mrs. Parks told Dorr about the problems blacks encountered every day in Montgomery. Even though she was from the opposite end of society, Parks made a strong impression on Dorr.
She was a rather unique person in the sense that she had a humble occupation of seamstress, but she was very well spoken. So she really had the respect of the upper classes, and she had the admiration of the lower classes.
One summer, Dorr sent Mrs. Parks to the Highlander School, a training center for civil rights organizers in Tennessee. Highlander introduced Parks to a world where blacks were not inferior, where blacks and whites worked together. She returned even more dedicated to civil rights. Parks was also inspired by the U.S. Supreme Court in Washington. The court ruled in the 1954 case of Brown versus Board of Education that segregated schools were unconstitutional. It was a landmark decision that shook the nation.
The Brown decision basically changed American ideology about what was accepted, but it didn't have much practical effect. The schools were still segregated in most places.
Parks and other civil rights activists knew that one court decision on schools would not change their lives. They had to challenge segregation in other areas of life as well.
As long as we continue to comply with these rules and regulations that kept us just crushed down as a people, then the power structure could always say, well, you see, they're not complaining and they accept this, so they are satisfied with it.
At the Montgomery NAACP office, Parks and her colleagues looked at racial bias where blacks lived, worked, and ate. But they chose a different target.
Lunch counters, you can eat at home. Movies, you don't really have to go to them. We needed to use the buses. They were not a luxury, but a necessity.
The activists knew they needed popular support for their legal challenge to segregation. That meant finding a leader who could generate that support in the community. While they were looking for a leader, the elders at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church were looking for a new minister. They finally found one. His name was Martin Luther King Jr.
We are not depending only on our power to speculate. We are not depending only on our knowledge and our supposed wisdom. We are also depending on the guidance of the Almighty God.
Dr. King was a rational human being and had great courage and had a vision. He really had a vision. But the most stunning thing about him to me was his coolness. He's the coolest man I have ever known.
Rosa Parks and Montgomery's other civil rights activists had found their leader. They had chosen the battleground for their next legal move. Now, all they needed was the right person to take the fateful and courageous step that would set their challenge in motion. The 1954 Supreme Court ruling outlawing segregation in schools electrified civil rights activists all over the South. In Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks and the NAACP chose the city's bus system for the next legal challenge to segregation. They were looking for the perfect test case to take to court. On December 1st, 1955, Parks had a rendezvous with destiny on the Cleveland Avenue bus. Because she was tired, she wasn't paying attention when she boarded the bus and paid her fare. Only then did she realize the driver was the same man who had thrown her off the bus 12 years earlier. But by then, it was too late.
I saw only one vacant seat, not very far from the front of the bus, just back of where the white passengers would stop, and we would begin what they considered our seats.
As the bus moved down Cleveland Avenue, the white seats quickly filled up. The bus driver told Parks and 3 other passengers in her row to give up their seats so that a white man could sit down.
And at first, none of us moved or stood up. But then he spoke a second time and said, y'all make it light on yourselves and let me have those seats.
The other 3 blacks left their seats, but Parks said she was not getting up. So the driver stopped the bus, and Parks waited while he called the police. When they arrived, Parks told them she saw no reason to move.
Then next I asked him, I said, why do y'all push us around? And he said, I don't know, but the law is a law and you're under arrest.
Parks' boss, E.D. Nixon, paid her bail and was overjoyed at the case she had delivered to him. Here was what they had all been waiting for. Later that night at her home, he asked her to be the one to challenge Alabama's segregated buses in court. Raymond Parks thought nobody in Montgomery would back them, but agreed to support his wife's decision. She said yes.
Well, it's not that I was just fed up then. I had been fed up all my life, as far back as I could remember, with being treated as, having to live and be less than a free person.
By midnight, Nixon and the other black activists had decided to see if the black community was as fed up as Parks was. A leaflet was secretly printed at the Alabama State University, urging Montgomery's 50,000 black citizens to stay off the buses as a show of support for one of their own. In charge of the protest was Martin Luther King Jr., the 26-year-old minister at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church.
Just the other day, one of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger. At present, we are in the midst of a protest, the Negro citizens of Montgomery.
The city's black community supported the protest immediately. People found other ways to get to work. And without blacks, who comprised 2/3 of the riders, the buses were nearly empty.
They walked. People walked to work. People walked as much as 5 and 6 miles to work backwards and forward. But the bus was empty. Bus was empty.
Mrs. Parks was in court that day, facing charges of disorderly conduct. After a 20-minute trial, she was found guilty and fined $10 plus court costs. That night, thousands of blacks flocked to the Holt Street Church. A one-day protest quickly turned into a boycott, inspired by Mrs. Parks' act of defiance.
It was just this humble, single individual. And she started a bonfire. And I think that was surprising.
It was mind-boggling to the white community, absolutely flabbergasted. They had felt that that Montgomery was a haven, that it had the best relation. They'll always tell you, we had got along better with our black folks than anybody else in the South. And they did get along well comparatively.
The city refused to give in, even though the empty buses were bankrupting the bus company. Blacks met regularly at local churches, inspired by Dr. King's rhetoric.
We never assemble with a feeling or a sense of bitterness. We always assemble with deep tones of love in our hearts. And we always assemble with great hope. We must act in such
King also used the meetings to introduce a new tactic that would prove most effective in the struggle to smash the segregation laws. It was called nonviolent or passive resistance. No matter what happened, King cautioned, never strike back.
Violence must not come from any of us. For if we become victimized with violent intents, we will have walked in vain.
You know, you couldn't believe they were going to kill the enemy with kindness. They were going to be polite. They were going to, it was sort of a love them to death, you know. Well, of course, this confounded everybody. It's the smartest thing in the world.
On January 31st, 8 weeks into the boycott, King's home was bombed. Tensions in the community mounted, and Parks' family started to receive death threats.
They would